Warning, everything in this video and on this channel is for educational purposes only. All content is intended for viewers 21 years of age or older. All acts are performed by professionals, and all people shown are 21 years of age or older. All acts are performed under the legal Chapter 67(8)(d) here in Nevada. Please do not attempt to recreate or reenact anything you see on this channel.
When you're having different genetics, when you're in different regions or in your different environments, you may have to change the process of feeding. And sometimes you do have to adapt in the way that you feed each plant. Well, in this episode, we're going to break down some of those different variables, how we've gone about it, and some of the impacts you may need to know. But before we get to that, check out this word from the sponsors.
This episode is brought to you by AC Infinity. Check out their all-in-one pH pen, which measures pH, EC, TDS, and temperature. The sensor probe is replaceable, and it comes with storage solution and calibration solutions. Click the link in the description section below so you can learn more about their all-in-one pH pen, and the discount code THESTASH15 works on both Amazon and their website, acinfinity.com.
From the Stash Podcast.
From the Stash Podcast, we're back. We've filmed episodes and we didn't do this, boys. I was dumb that we didn't do it earlier.
We've gotten farther and farther apart.
I know.
We're gonna next episode. Someone's gonna have to get up, walk over, get up, meet in the middle, get back and sit down. Well, add some effects, like some lightning
and touch.
Well, we got free hands this time. In the past we've had to hold the mics. Now
that was
we've got these stands.
We did it because of the one guy who was upset about us holding the mics.
Mainly because he's like, you're holding mics that aren't supposed to be held as we're hanging on to them.
So we changed.
We knew that, by the way.
It was thanks to the members that allowed us to buy these.
You guys bought these for
from
us.
thestash.com. Become a member today.
Thank you. Appreciate you guys.
Thank you.
So a lot of people have been changing up their regimen and their routine more and more, it seems, over the years, especially with such a vast variety of genetics. And it seems like there's more adapting and more adaptive approaches to feeding. And I think touching on some of that would be good, especially when it's per cultivar or strain, per grow type or grow room, or even season. I know some people change up their feeding style per season even. So I think it's a topic that isn't dove in deep enough, or as my kids say, dived it deep enough.
Yeah, I say that from time to time too.
Yeah, and I think that people should also be thinking about their own subjective setup while we're talking about this, and think about things that may fit with that their grow, or maybe they could add in the 2 cents below. Those are bars.
There's so many different ways to grow and so many different ways to feed. It's going to be a good conversation here. I mean, you've got organics, you've got synthetics, you've got synganic, and then going from strain to strain, pheno to pheno evenly, maybe it's the same cross. You could see differences in the way the plant kind of uptakes and what it can handle, what's too much, what's not enough, so on and so forth. So, yeah, it's going to be a good one.
Yeah, I think so too. And one of the hardest things I've had to face myself is learning that upsizing your grow involves taking into consideration how each and every genetic responds to your routine. So good.
Yeah.
Banger.
Well, like for me, I tend to like to make things difficult in my garden. I don't like to have an easy grow. Seems, I don't know why.
Taking a page out of my book.
Yeah, dude, every genetic that I like is always the most finicky one and always needs extra special training and takes longer to grow. Don't know why. I love the flavor and I'm like, hell yeah, this is so good. I mean, look at even the fire shit. We all were like, this is the best. Blank's like, it's a 12-week flower. And I'm like, why? Why do I always like these ones, man? Why can't I like something that's 7 weeks? Give me a 49-dayer. And me's like, this is delicious. Never the case. But I've always noticed that when I have these longer flowering genetics, it seems like I have to give a little more nitrogen longer. The transition into flower, that 4 week for me, 3 weeks is normally for stretch, 4 to 5 week stretch. So it's almost like I'm having to wean off that nitrogen more, but as I'm doing it, my plant's showing deficiencies because it's still kind of vegging. It's that long of a flowering plant that first initial month is almost like an extended veg period. So it's like I have to change up my routine for a small select few plants, unless all of my plants are in the same style. But it seems in that case, it almost costs me more per plant when I'm looking at the, feeding and the food that I'm dealing with, because I have to give more of one nutrient than the other. And then by the end of my whole cycle, if it's bottled nutrients, I've got one bottle that's depleted more than the others. I hate that shit. And you can't buy a kit. You got to get one bottle.
Yeah.
It's such a pain. You talk about the longer flowering strains and how, they do stretch for longer. Some people will, they'll continue to feed veg nutrients into the first couple weeks of flowering in order to try to adapt the feeding, right, for those longer flowering cultivars. So that's a common technique. Other folks will just make that switch right away, and they might run into deficiencies week 4 of flower going into week 5 of flower, which is arguably some of the worst weeks that you can get a deficiency, right? So like they're cutting off that nitrogen too early, the plant's continuing to stretch, looking for the nitrogen 4 weeks into it, and it doesn't have it, so it starts throwing deficiencies. Well, then there's your flower production's impacted negatively. Now, I'm not saying that you can't rebound from that, right? But there's an impact there, right? Could be a stunt in growth there. There could be a lack of flower formation. So yeah, you definitely have to adjust when it comes to feedings, and it's got to be cultivar dependent.
I've noticed some of those same exact genetics they'll want less, like a lower EC, but more frequent feeding. They uptake more food on a regular basis, but when I try to feed them the same amount as the others, dude, I swear every time they're burning. It's like I have to lower my food amounts, but I still have to feed just as much. So I'm almost using the same amount of nutrients, but I have to do it more often. That's where the automated watering is a godsend for a lot of these genetics, because you can dial it in and have it be a little bit more refined per genetic. It just depends what kind of system you're running. If you have a monocrop, if I'm running, 10 genetics in one space and I'm using the tray to grow, let's say, that's one feeding system for 10 genetics. So I got to have separate ones for each individual plant. And it becomes a headache for a lot of people and less desirable. And I think if you're going to grow these finicky genetics, I recommend monocropping. Single genetics, 3 or 4 of them at once, never doing your plant that's a short, squatty little indica that's done in 49 days versus your tall, crazy one. The canopy difference, the feeding difference, the amount of energy and attention, it's made it so my feeding routine organic all the way. I love the organic aspect because I can just scoop what I need per plant. And then if anything, my automated watering is watering that in, it's not feeding it.
One thing I think is very important too, if you're going to be trying to make sure that you're getting specifics, is like documentation. Write everything down, because every plant consumes a little bit differently, but you're going to forget what you gave plant A, plant B, plant C, and you're not going to remember how it responded in week 2 versus week 4. So if you're really enjoy this smoke and you want to go back and you want to be like, well, how did it respond? If you wrote all this down, you're going to have a good indicator, a good idea of how to take on the future, how to take her on again, and know specifically, not even in the future, but like a week or so later, if you're going to feed her again, that genetic 1 needs 2 times the amount. She's a heavy eater. She needs 2 times the amount that genetic 2 and 3 need. So, right? She's a man eater. So write everything down. Document everything. That's actually one thing that I really enjoy about Chris. I've said this many times, is that
he's a journalist. when you ask him about Chill Out OG, he knows exactly what it took, what it takes, where it was in week whatever, and how it fed, how it responded, what was the smoke like, because you wrote it all down. It's not going off memory, or you're going to forget.
Yeah, and like you said, we talked about this a handful of times in the past, but in case anybody's new, I don't want to leave you in the dark. The way I do it is really just through a sheet, like an Excel spreadsheet or Google Sheets. And I've got basically the date is on that first column coming down all the rows. And then across the top on the columns, there's different, whatever plant I'm growing, different strains on each one, right? And then I just scroll down to whatever date I'm working in, and then that cell for that plant. I just enter in all sorts of information. I always put the feeding in there. So whenever I do a feeding, I always put what the dosage is. So that way I can look back, even in that current grow, right? It's helpful for future grows like Pigeons has mentioned, but even that current grow, I can look, okay, I fed this 2 weeks ago, and okay, stash blend. Okay, I do stash blend every other feeding, for example. So I know, like, I can remember. It's super, super helpful. And yeah, having grown a bunch of different strains, a lot of home growers do, because they want that variety. Right, I'm one of the folks that fall in that camp to where I'm often growing 6 to 12 plants, and those 6 to 12 plants are all different cultivars. So I have to adjust each individual ones. If I'm using bottled nutrients, for example, I am looking at each one individually and referencing my notes and saying, okay, this one's on a half dose. looking at the plant, I'm reading the plant, I'm going to continue a half dose, or looks like it's lighting up a little bit. Let me increase this to 3/4 of a dose or a full dose or whatever, right? I have to do that for each individual plant when I'm growing synthetic nutrients. Now, Rob had touched upon how it makes it a lot easier with the organics,
Night and day.
where some of these are just one scoop per plant of organic dry amendments, and there's a blend of different amendments in there. And you just do a top dressing, scratch into the surface 2-3 times per grow entirely, and then it's just water only is the only kind of liquid that you're adding in there.
Or stash blend mixed in.
It can make things so much easier on that avenue. And yeah, we got stash blend as an additive, shameless plug there. We've also got the nutrient that we're working on that we've leaked a little bit. We've got in testing right now, and it's looking really good. And ease of use is definitely one of the things that we're aiming for.
Well, and to be able to have your genetics being tailored to your feeding schedule tailored to the genetics, you can do that a little bit more with the organic aspect, because it's almost like you're giving your plant the battery, and if that particular cultivar doesn't need as much juice, well, you're going to have more nutrient-rich soil after the plant's done. It's not going to uptake everything as much. Versus others that are hungrier, you may have to add another scoop in, midway through flower potentially even. Or again, the teas, the automatic tea, the instant tea with stash blend, you're giving it still some extra food consistently, but not all plants will need that. I've had some that I have to do less stash blend with, where it's a half a teaspoon, because they don't need more food. The base nutrients is a little too much adding that in, but it depends on the cultivar. I just think that you have a lot of people who think it one size fits all, and they see a program like Athena's program, and they think, I'm just going to run this, not realizing that certain genetics may need a little higher EC or lower EC. But if you do it like P and put it in your grow, if the genetic doesn't fit your routine, your style, it doesn't make the cut. You're going to spend so much time working uphill trying to change all of your process to be able to fit this new cultivar that may or may not be the one, and I think that's that tough part of trying to have a finicky genetic, or one that needs to be fed a little different. It's sometimes not always worth the squeeze. The juice isn't, at least.
Yeah, and these different grow styles, I mean, you could kind of adapt to like the number of cultivars you're growing at once, right? Like I mentioned, the difficulty of me growing 6 to 12 different cultivars. And if I'm using synthetic nutrients, it's a little bit more difficult than using the organics, right? Let's warp over to hydroponics, right? Deep water culture, let's say it's an individual bucket. Well, you can tailor each individual bucket with the nutrients that you're working with, versus an RDWC system where it's all connected to a reservoir. All those plants are being fed the same exact nutrient mix. Well, you could see some variation in the way the plants are uptaken. Some plants could be struggling, deficient or borderline deficient, while others are toxic, has toxicity or borderline toxicity, right? And so it becomes more challenging depending on what style you're growing in. So there's something to keep in mind. Although, if you're really hardcore on hydroponics, do you want to go the RDWC route where you're just topping off a reservoir and you have one nutrient mix per reservoir and you just hope for the best? Or do you want to manage each individual bucket? You know what I mean? It just becomes more labor intensive that way. So you really got to look at the pros and cons of things and just kind of pick what route you think is going to be best for you and your way of growing.
We should have put that in the lazy grower episode, the RDWC. That is, it's such a simple, or drain to waste, such a simple process. I don't even think about it. Good point.
Yeah. You know what? It's like you also make up a good point when it comes down to your grow style as well, because I'm very train heavy in my garden, and it's easy to see that the abuse that my plants take are a little bit more than what they can be used to. So to adapt to that, adding a silica into the mix is going to give me a tougher plant cell wall, a little more malleable, so that I can train without any kind of real devastation to the plant. We've kind of talked about system, we've kind of talked about genetic in regards to treating them different, but it's like there's signs to look for. Like when we talk about adaptive feeding and we talk about trying to get it right for our system, some things to look out for when you say, well, how do I know if I need to adapt my feeding for my grow? Your plants are going to tell you. There are signs from the plant that are going to be, you're either going to be, as you mentioned, deficient. The regimen that you were giving your garden before simply doesn't work for this genetic. So it could be too much, it could be too less, and you're looking for those signs. Like if you're deficient, the rule of thumb is that yellowing is from the bottom up. Toxicity, generally speaking, is going to be something that's, around the top of the plant or more consistently throughout the plant.
Throughout the plant, super dark leaves, shiny, curling. Yeah.
Yep. I'm not really good at troubleshooting, but the ones I'm really good at is, nitrogen. Nitrogen tox is the dark leaves. Often a twist to the leaves as well. Really dark, and they're not coming out that broad. Those fingers are kind of doing this weird twist. That's nitrogen. I know that phosphorus can be like browning spots with like some dark curling leaves.
Deficiency of it, yeah.
Deficiency.
Yeah.
And it's like the tough part is too, is then there's always those variables like you have root damage or pH issues that are showing these other things. So it's tough in that sense, but learning to read the plant is going to help you with this adaptive feeding to be able to understand like, okay, this one right here looks like she's taking too much in, because you see these signs and you know what you're feeding the plant. It's one of those deals where if you don't have the data, if you aren't keeping notes when you're doing these slight changes, like I do it oftentimes in Google Keep, I'll put it in there. So like I'll have a separate tab essentially per genetic, and I just will do little notes on each thing and just random thoughts like this one here sucked at cloning, like just little shit. But I've noticed that my feeding, when I'm not keeping track of stuff and I bring a new genetic in and I'm like, I'm just going to feed it the same way, I'm not noticing as it progressively deteriorates or gets worse. It's just one day I look and I'm like, oh shit,
What happened?
what's the deal? Versus when I'm consciously feeding this plant a little lower to see how she takes, a little higher to see how she takes, to kind of do it in a conscious way. And that's like tapering off some. If I'm starting off with, let's say, bottled nutrients, oftentimes I'll go with 50 to 75% on the feeding with a lot of the genetics I have. Sometimes, though, honestly, I see people will go 100% and then wait until there's issues. I'm a firm believer, and I'd rather see a little bit of deficiency than toxicity. I'd rather feed a little more than be like, oh, shit, and you got to dial it back. That's my personal take. What about you guys? Do you go full strength and everything right away per genetic, or do you kind of low and steady?
I usually ramp up. It really depends on the nutrient line, right? Not all nutrient lines are created equal. Like I ran Fox Farm for many, many years when I first began, and it was a very concentrated one. And I'd have to start it oftentimes a quarter dose or even a third of a dose in the very beginning, and then work my way up. And I hardly ever touched a full dose. I'd just probably, I can name number of genetics on one hand that I actually ramped up to a full dose in flowering, versus Athena, which I'm trying out right now for the first time. I've grown a whole bunch of plants in that. I'm starting out with a half dose in veg, but full dose in flower. And that seems to be the theme. All the people I'm talking with some people do a full dose the whole way. And again, not all nutrient lines are created equal. Some of these lines are for this particular plant that we're growing, right? Others are more for a wide variety of plants, like that Fox Farm formula. I mean, people are growing like, lettuce, tomatoes, peppers, like all that stuff is kind of more the focus versus canna. And so, I am oftentimes doing a lower dose, but it depends on what nutrient line it is.
Well, it's like I used to use Dynagrow back in the day, and that was primarily for orchids. Dynagrow was crazy. I just had Dynagrow bloom and veg, and that's all I'd use. And then I had a Protect I would use for a while too. That was like a silica. So it's like just a super, super simple, and the bud was really good. It did its thing, but it was so concentrated. I mean, it came in a little bottle like this, and it would take care of 24 plants easily for the whole cycle. So it was just, you couldn't go a little too heavy because it was that strong. And depending on the stuff, like the Athena blend is pretty blended. It's a lot of water. So you're able to give it exactly what they say, and the plants do pretty well. Like I followed the program to a T, and everything yielded good. Terps are there. It's good, However, when I try to do my old traditional way of I'm going to start low and steady and do all these things, I'm deficient as hell. I've got issues. So it's like they really they arm you with the exact amount for success.
Yeah.
Versus others are like, hey, plant person, botanist, you should be able to figure it out, read the plant. And it's like not everybody has that knowledge. And it took me years to be able to understand what read the plant meant. That sounded like some hippie, Mr. Miyagi, just wax on, wax off. You learn. And I'm like, what do you mean read the plant, motherfucker? Where's the words? I'm like, oh, see the signs and understand deficiencies and toxicities, and when a plant's happy and when it's not, and morphology of why it grows this way, and maybe it's not supposed to. Maybe it's my influence that's doing it. But then now I understand that I'd rather, like I said, low and steady, because I don't want to have to build backwards from that wonkiness and that weird growth, single blade leaves and funkiness, having to flush the plant. It becomes more work, I feel, when you go too far versus too low and work your way up.
Yeah, and then when you flush your plant, well, then you're going to it's extreme from it being toxic to all of a sudden now it's showing these weird deficiencies out of nowhere because you flushed the plant, and maybe when you flushed it, depending on what medium you're using, right, there's a lack of oxygen in the root zone. It's just oversaturated. You've overwatered it at that point. That's not. I'm on the same camp as you, where I'd rather run a little bit deficient instead of toxic. And work my way, you know what I mean?
Dude, the amount of time you're extending in your grow with the flush, with the recovery from the flush, with the build back to health. Like, dude, fuck.
And the flower, if you're in flowering, the flower formation is drastically harmed, right? It's like, it can be airy, super just airiness if there's too much nitrogen in flowering. I've experienced that before. And if you're in week 4, 5, even going into 6, and you're seeing that area, there's no recovering from it. It's not like, okay, I fixed my feeding schedule, I'm no longer overfeeding, now things are going to dense up. Doesn't happen. At least in my experience, it doesn't happen.
It's harsher too. That's that black ash shit that I see often.
You've completely ruined your grow at that point.
100%.
I've had to throw away pounds because of that. So, yeah.
So, like, without diving too much into, like, the science and the specifics of what each toxicity and deficiency looks like, because I don't have time. For me, I work on rule of thumbs, generalities, and when I see a deficiency, as I mentioned, in my head I think of a plant that is hungry, is taking up food, it's searching for food, bringing it close to itself, so it's sucking all the nutrients from the roots up to its apex. When it's toxic, you're seeing not that. So without getting too complicated, because this is how I do things, if it's not deficient, it's toxic. Okay, figured that out. Now, how do you handle each? Well, as you mentioned, if you're toxic, flushing is certainly an option. It'll deplete the nutrients fast. For me, I'm hoping I've watched the plant, or talk or whatever, listen to the plant,
the plant.
and it's told me that, okay, I'm seeing a change here. I'm seeing this plant starting to curl on the tips of the leaves. What's happening? I'm starting to see some spots happening. What's going on here? I'm seeing some really dark leaves. What's going on here? That's a toxicity. To me, add water. So I'm not going to flush per se, but over the course of the next 2 weeks, I'm just going to add water.
You're going to leach.
Thank you. My regiment is water, feed, water, feed, water, feed. That's how I just water in my garden. If I have a toxicity, I'm removing a feed. It's now water, water, water. And if I'm seeing a difference because I'm synthetic, I'm seeing that change happen within a couple days, am I going to feed again? And if I am, I'm going to start very low. Not 50, 75%, probably 25 to 50% to see how she takes on that change. And then watching the plant, I'm going to see, okay, she's either getting brighter and happier, or she's not ready yet and she's still burning and needs more water. Now, of course, that you have that time in veg, but you don't always have that time in flower. And so I apply the opposite if you see a deficiency. You need to add food. So I'm going to increase the food in my milliliters each food. I could do instead of a water, feed water, it could be a feed water, feed water, based on, am I seeing a change? So without getting too complicated, that's how I take on toxicities and deficiencies.
Well, and that's understanding the plant too. And that's the key thing, is like starting out, failing isn't the worst thing, because you really start to see what the stuff is. When you watch a video, if somebody's giving you all of the keys of here's what I fed, here's the result, here's why it looks this way, maybe I get that. But when somebody says, well, look at this chart that someone just shared that has a picture of yellowing leaves that are curling. Motherfucker, there's a 50 of them that look the same.
Heat stress looks like 5 of these toxicities.
All. Heat stress and all.
He's stressed and old.
It's a situation where you're looking at 10 variations of the same leaf, and one's saying this is actually phosphorus, this is actually potassium, and it's like, what? It's so hard to tell. But then when you see a whole plant, you zoom out, and then they tell you exactly why and what. You're like, oh, that's the potassium deficiency, or that's the toxicity. It's a nitrogen toxicity. Now I get it, because the clawing looked the same way when my fan was blowing too heavy on the plant, or my pH was weirded out. Like, there's all these variables that can really throw you for a loop until you really have this issue, and then you never forget. It's like a car issue. You'll never forget the sound of your wheel bearing.
Or the sound of a loose belt.
Yeah, once it happens, then you're like, oh, dude, that's a loose belt.
That's
like,
a loose belt.
Yeah.
I think it's important to understand for adaptive feeding is if you're seeing something, whether it's if you're seeing something and you don't know what it is, as you just mentioned, the fan blowing on you might think, those dry leaves are now curling, and it's like they're old man leaves. It's like, well,
old woman.
It's back
hopefully.
For me, there's another generality rule of thumb for me. It's called back to basics. What does that mean? Back to basics. Now, when I was just a wee lass, we used to check the pH of the water that was going in. I don't do that anymore because I'm very confident with my water source. So check the pH of your water. Is the pH in your zone, or are you way one left or way one way right? Because we know what the pH scale looks like, and if you're way left, well, you're only taking up the left scale of nutrients. You're not taking up the right scale, and vice versa. pH your water. Another one is to check the runoff. I don't check my runoff anymore. I've been using the same nutrients for years. I'm very confident. But if I have an issue, back to basics. Check the runoff. What does that mean? Water your plant. Let all that shit come out. Water it again. Then collect that and kind of get an idea of what is in your pot. And what does that mean? Well, are you pH it and check the parts per million. Check your EC. Are you getting out what you're putting in? Because that'll indicate whether you've got a lockout in there or something going on in the plant, and it's not because of a fan. If everything's the same, maybe there's an environmental issue. So I just want to be. It's a great troubleshoot to understand how to adapt.
It's a good troubleshooting checklist. It's almost like something that you should go through first, and then be like, all right, all these things, none of this, it's something unique. We got to start diving deeper, because a lot of times it will be. Get your bingo list and go through. It's one of the things on the bingo chart. Yeah, it's just, it boils down to knowing how to read that.
It reminds me. Sorry to interrupt you, but it reminds me of when you call in at a tech team, and the guy goes, "Have you unplugged it and plugged it back in? Have you turned it off and turned it back on?" And everybody's like, "Of course I've turned it." But if you don't start there,
troubleshooting tips,
you have to start at the beginning, or you're gonna skip the obvious and move on. But it wasn't plugged in. Right, so it's like that's how I feel with the same thing with the plant. Sorry.
Well, and I think when you're going into organic feeding, like I was saying earlier, it's a little more forgiving. You can kind of do things a little differently, but you can still have too hot a soil for certain genetics. I've had that happen before, where it's like the plant doesn't grow versus another one's thriving. I'm like, what the hell is going on? Why is this seedling still a seedling and my other plant's bigger than a clone? But it's because, again, some plants need less food to start than the others, and if I'm putting it in with something that is such a hot soil that I don't put a more inert media around the root itself, so it kind of work its way in and leach that food in, then I'm stunting my plant right away. So you're not just totally safe and organic, but I swear it's just more forgiving in the sense that it's like, all right, we got 2 weeks to see the results. Everything seems like 2 weeks. And we put it in 2 weeks, we'll see. Versus like synthetic, if you decide to tackle it and you tackle it too hard one way and you're like, oh, it's a deficiency, and it's a pH issue. And you just added more food into there. Now we have a toxicity tomorrow. Like, that's the difference. It's readily available, ready to go in there. But on the other side of it, you can fix the issues a lot quicker with the synthetic side, especially in hydro. Hydro, there's nothing to work through the roots. It's roots to newts. Bars again. I've had bars all night.
Yeah, with the organics, it does, in my opinion, make it easier as well. Because if you are kind of, say, overfeeding does exist, right? You can certainly get nitrogen toxicity with organic amendments.
Oh yeah,
and I've had it happen before. And too heavily amending the medium prior to starting, right? Happened to me before. 7-gallon containers, 10-gallon containers, whatever. Adding in too much, having the plant grow, seeing those dark green leaves. But easier to correct, in my opinion. It's just kind of what Pigeons has mentioned. He does with
Water.
synthetics is just water, right? You're not really adding anything else. Just you're continuing to water and water, and then you're not really doing that next top dressing until you've seen that plant lighten up considerably. Then you kind of know that, hey, the end is near, right? The depletion of nutrients is near. Something needs to be added. And of course, you could speed things up with getting something that's like water soluble, a tea, for example, compost tea.
Like a stash
Put
blend
that in
even?
there. It's more available for the plants to uptake right away, or increasing that micropopulation in order to break down some of those amendments that need to be broken down and turned into nutrients that the plant can then uptake. So yeah, it's just with organics, you do have to adapt on that as well. If things are too heavy, just making sure that you're only adding water, that's your only input. You're not adding more compost, not adding worm castings. Like, it's just not needed at that point. So reading the plant is definitely huge on that avenue as well.
I think that's the key part is from all of them is knowing the plant, because I've been the person where I thought I had a deficiency and then I'm like, oh, well, I'll add this and I'll see in 2 weeks. But I was, again, having a toxicity, misread it. I was actually a wind burn at the time is what it ended up being. And I ended up adding food to it and saw 2 weeks later that I ruined my plant. Even worse, I needed to just chill. So it's that understanding where you're going, how far one way or the other. And again, reading the side of the plant, but then knowing how to correct it and the time it takes to correct it based on the media or nutrients that you're using. Because some it's a rapid result. It's quick. Others, you need to just have patience and wait and see it bounce back. Because those leaves aren't just going to pop right back up once they're curled and tight. It's going to take a little bit of time. You'll notice the new growth will be good. And some of the old growth may stay a little wonky. If it's crisped and burnt and brown at the leaves, that's not going to regreen. You know, if it's fully yellow, sometimes I've seen the yellow repigment and get a little green again. But oftentimes it's the plant's like almost scarred. But the buds will still be really healthy. It'll still grow very good. So it's, again, identifying the plant stress or the plant issues per plant and knowing that sometimes recovery, you need more patience than others. It just depends.
Yeah, 100%. You know, another thing that we haven't really dove deep into yet that affects nutrient uptake is the environment.
I was just going to say that.
Right? So took the words out of Pigeon's mouth.
CO2 even, you know.
The environment, everything from temperature, that's going to impact it, right? The higher the temperature, the
Plant
more...
transpiration.
In layman's terms, right, the more the plant is going to be moving around, right? Those chemical reactions are going to be occurring, right? The lower the temp, the slower things are going to happen, not just within the plant, but also the microbes in the medium, right? If you're lowering that temperature, well, the microbes are going to be moving slower. They're going to be breaking down those nutrients not as fast. So something to keep in mind in there. Humidity, another thing that, of course, temperature and humidity in VPD, it's going to impact the stomata opening and really, again, how well that plant is functioning. Intaking CO2, for example.
Yep.
Adding in CO2, increasing that is going to allow your plants to move faster. You're going to be uptaking nutrients more often or less depending on the environment.
100%.
Funny, you took the exact words out of my mouth. I would have said the exact same thing.
I think that's where people are understanding, like, the manipulation of your plant can be vast. You can do a lot, but then also the impact of the things that you're not paying attention to can also be crazy bad. If you're not on top of all these things, which we have videos that go over all of this and then some, but it's a stressful time for people when they don't know what the hell's going on with their plant and they don't know what they need to do to adapt and change. And I think people who haven't experienced this, I hope this episode has helped in that sense. But those who have, it would be amazing to add to the conversation below
100%.
and just help kind of let people know some of these certain troubleshooting things and advice to be able to bounce back from those, or how you've changed and pivoted and adapted into how you're feeding per genetic.
Of course, this plant is so diverse that one regimen doesn't fit all, and you have to adapt to grow the fur, brother.
I was just going to say one size doesn't fit all. So yeah, again, we complete sentences for each other.
That's how we do.
We're brothers. So yeah, with that being said, man, thank you so much to all of the people who support the channel.
Thanks to our members.
The members, man, to
Members
make this happen.
from thestash.com.
Thank you for getting us here, guys. Thank you for all the opportunities.
Who, have supported us by getting our merch. Check it out.
Ooh,
Stashmerch.com, of course, and stashblend.com. Crazy stuff on the way. Working on that complete cycle we were talking about with the nutrition. So stay tuned for that. More updates.
Keep an eye out for that. And also, I'm sure people are going to be wondering about my shirt right here, the CalMag shirt.
Designed by Chris.
For those listening, it says CalMag. I put that shit on everything. And this is by watchcltv.com. Yeah, that's
My
Rob's
guy, thank you, sir.
design. So
Thank you,
pick
sir.
one of those out. That's cool.
Hell yeah, man. CalMag saved my marriage.
It did.
On behalf of that, I'm Pigeons. That's Rob. That's Chris. We're from the Stash. We'll check you out next week. Peace.
Try 'em. Growers who are looking for that secret sauce usually are just missing something from their garden. And to help with that, we bring you the Stash Blend Premium Plant Additive. Stash Blend brings beneficial bacteria, silicon, seaweed, humic acid, and has enough macronutrition to help lower the dosages of your base feed too. Unleash your plant's true potential with Stash Blend Premium Plant Additive. Available at Growers House.
If you're just getting started growing cannabis, check out 7 Steps to Grow Cannabis. It's a beginner-friendly book for growing indoors that covers growing in soil and in cocoa. For those interested in organic methods, my second book, Organic Cannabis Cultivation, covers beginner to intermediate techniques. You can produce high-quality organic cannabis using sustainable practices. Both books are available on Amazon, but you can get a discount by using code THESTASH on my website, mrgrowit.com.